Lucinda, hi.
Hi, how are you?
Good, good. Lucinda, we're so grateful for you taking time off your very busy schedule as a sales leader, as a mom. I know how challenging it is. You wear multiple hats. So we're so grateful for you making time for us today. Um, I think Lucinda and I go way back, and since she's accomplished so much. So I'm just really honored that she's made time to talk through her journey. A little bit about Lucinda, and I'm not going to give everything away, is that Lucinda's background in sales goes past 12 years. And she's worked in a range of sales roles, predominantly within the tech space for a number of tech startups and unicorns, predominantly SaaS-based roles. She's worked as an SDR, a BDR, an AE, and now a sales leader managing and leading teams. She's very passionate about making the office a fun place to work. She's got a side hustle in the business where she's also a social chair, and she prioritizes creating diversity within the business. She also is quite vocal about increasing the number of women that should be working in sales, and she's an ambassador for that, where she vocally shares her experience and what she looks for when she's hiring new employees into her roles. So, listen, if you just want to give our audience today a little bit about your background, your journey, what's inspired you to stay within sales. You've stepped out to be a mom and mat leave and all of that. Just a little bit. That'd be great. So our audience gets to know you a little bit.
Yeah, for sure. I think you've done a phenomenal job summarizing my entire
I
professional
tried to kind
background.
of, there's so much, there's so much. And I was like, oh, she's done so much. And I'm so incredibly proud because I think it's been over 10 years since we've met. So,
Yes, I was going to say not, well, I guess no, no one potentially might know, but obviously you were my first internal recruiter that I ever worked with. You actually placed me in my first ever sales
sales
role, which
role.
was selling conference tickets, which was a bit of a boiler room-esque role and was such a but I loved it. It was such a foundational moment for me in my career, and I frequently even refer back to it. And I think the managers that we had there and the training and everything that we got was phenomenal. So I'm so proud of that being the where I fortified my sales skills and really launched then into the tech sales career. The reason that I personally loved sales, always will, always have, is obviously you would know from my previous background of working together, my competitive nature. I love having KPIs and clear guidelines of what success looks like. Am I meeting my goals? Am I doing a good job? It's very binary, it's black and white. Additionally to that, obviously, once again, competitive. And for me, I know there's often conversations about women feeling like they're not paid fairly, etc. But that has never been my experience in sales, even from our days at IQPC, we were all paid the same base, and then everything was the commission component. So, due to that, I've always loved sales in that you reap what you sow, you earn what you deserve in terms of work and output. I pride myself on being an exceptionally hard worker and very driven and self motivated. So, for me, that's always been such a motivating factor. And one of the reasons I love sales is I do think there's this really equitable moment of your work and what you put in is what you get back.
100%. So tell us a little bit about your journey because you obviously stepped into leadership in the last, what,
Five-ish, 5-ish
five years?
years, I'd say.
Uh,
7, maybe 5 to 7. I have to check
exactly.
my LinkedIn. It's all a
Are you,
blur with the babies.
I know with the babies, now you've got two, right?
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So you're obviously wearing multiple hats. You've stepped out of the workforce, had mat leave, and then come back. How's it been for you? Because I think this connects with a lot of women that are currently in sales. So, tell us a little bit about what you think businesses may have done better or could have done better, or, you think, okay, you know what? I'm one of those who've made it and I've actually, been resilient enough to stay in sales. And I know you're very passionate about it. You've shared that. But obviously, uh, we see a lack of that It's always a challenge to find women in sales. And
Yes.
let's be honest, it is because you're a
Yeah.
hiring manager. I'm constantly
Yeah.
talking to candidates, and I'd say that's 30% of the candidates I speak with.
Yeah.
I can say that hand in heart. So, what do you think businesses could do more? And what do you think they could have done for you?
It's such an interesting point. I think that first and foremost, I will say I'm exceptionally lucky that I've worked at phenomenal companies and I've always had very positive experiences. And my current company, Hi Bob, I sing their praises. They're flexible and, COVID has advanced flexible workplaces. So I personally have had very, very positive experiences. But I think tech is quite progressive and flexible and often, SaaS does provide great opportunity, but there is more still that needs to be done, of course. I
Mm-hmm.
think for retention, attracting females in sales, it's such an interesting point because you would have seen my post recently on LinkedIn. One of the ongoing conundrums in my mind is we often have very dense population of females in the more junior SDR, BDR roles. But then as we move up to AE, it thins out. And I genuinely don't know where the young female talent goes because, from my perspective, and even if you go and look at Gong statistics, female sellers can often be the most successful sellers. So it's really discouraging to see that thin out of talent pipeline. So actually, when I see female account executive talent, I get very excited.
You
Um,
mentioned that.
I genuinely want females in the team and diverse thought, etc., to remove echo chambers. Women have stats on Gong that show they're better active listeners. Typically, obviously, males can be great at that too, but typically speaking, there are really powerful stats that suggest female account executives and sellers are an asset. So there is a lot that can be done in terms of obviously attracting, retaining. I think one thing when we speak about equity and creating equitable workplaces for women is also for men. The
Mm-hmm.
more and for both carers and the more we create flexibility for everyone in terms of family and flexibility, the more we empower the primary caregiver. Because ultimately, for example, with me and my children, if my husband has better flexibility and can support me, it also supports me better as the primary carer or the female of the house. So I think that's a big part of the conversation is equity for all and inclusion and creating that
Mm.
opportunity then facilitates me to have better flexibility. So it's a really important part of the discussion that I want to always highlight is the more we have that fairness and create that,
Mm.
it's actually going to help all of us together with
Exactly.
our families.
Yeah, that's awesome because I think that's a great point because the focus was purely around what are we doing for women, but actually it's the whole family unit.
Yeah.
What are we doing for the males in the family, right, who need to support their women as primary caregivers? Because some males could be working three jobs, and that gives the female absolutely no flexibility. So,
Yeah.
no, I think you made a very valid point there. So, just with you personally, how do you manage that, right? Because you juggle being a sales leader, a mom, it's hectic. Uh,
Yep.
what 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 do you do to kind of keep yourself together?
Definitely, I think you have to let go of the concept of having it all or having it all together. Like, if I'm having this conversation with you and I might be showing up in my best possible way from a work perspective, my house is probably an absolute disaster. And I have to accept that not
Let go.
everything is going to be perfect across the board at all times. I'm going to sometimes have to prioritize different things. And I think there's a really interesting TED talk that I listened to, which I love, that talks about the concept of they're an emergency care worker and it's a female who speaks. And she says triage. And so when they speak about how they never define themselves as busy, and I love that concept. Like, I'm not busy, I just need to triage. And so, ruthless prioritization is really important. What is my most important thing? Ultimately, for example, if my kids are sick, they will be my number one priority. Full stop, end of story. Work is obviously a huge priority, but having ruthless prioritization when and where you need to and setting those expectations and boundaries. Once again, I'm very fortunate to work at a company that allows me to do that because I'm aware that not every company is going to be the same in terms of what they let you kind of do and their policies. Secondly, I like to remind myself what is hard. So for example, when I had one child, what I mean by that is when I had my first child, I was working full time. I was like, geez, this is really hard. And then I had my second, and I was like, wow, I really didn't know what hard was when I had one child, because two is much harder. And so now I've had this epiphany of you don't actually know what hard is, because it's all relative. So what I mean by that is I try and just be grateful for what I have and think, there's other women before us that didn't get to work from home, didn't get flexibility, that had to operate in the confinements of the work time pre-COVID and make daycare drop-offs and pickups. So I try and remind myself, like, yes, things can feel hard to you right now, but also be grateful, and hard is this relative concept. So I really try and give myself that kind of pep talk of, you don't really know what hard is. Add 3 kids on and it would be much harder.
Well, I'm going to have a look at this TED talk on triage, because I think, I think you made a very valid point there. But I was listening to a podcast, and it talks about work-life balance. And in our head, we're striving for it. But as working women, it doesn't exist.
Yep.
It's what you pencil in and how well planned and organized you are. So
Definitely.
I think hats off to women that push through working in a highly KPI driven environment, where you've got to be self motivated to hit those numbers and targets on a monthly basis. It's not easy. So, just from your perspective, having such extensive experience and really been through, those roles from an SDR to an AE and so forth, what do you think businesses can be doing better to retain sales talent, female sales talent?
Yeah, I think there's 2 points to this. I think firstly, the attracting component. So you obviously want to have a diverse culture, you want to celebrate diversity, showcase your successful female leaders and
Mhm.
celebrate them and show that path to aspiring young females and build out what that looks like. I think additionally to that, then retaining. So if you have females going on maternity leave, to me, that's such an exciting opportunity of what businesses can do to safely bring women back into the workplace, because it is an anxious time. You're leaving your baby, you're returning, and it feels a bit unknown, especially if the company has let you go into the ethera and
Mm.
not necessarily kept up communication and touch points. So, from a retention and maternity leave retention standpoint, I I think creating just a really safe return to work, like almost a re-onboarding journey that sets that expectation. Like, we expect that this is a challenging time, and even from time at Google, they would let people come back for a couple of days a week, and
Yeah.
you would never be expected to come back full time, and slow ramp and re-ramp into your role and different things like that. So I think there's so much opportunity to explore that. And then for female retention in general, obviously we've spoken about it already, and I don't want to labor on the point too much, but it's flexibility for the parents. And
Mm. Mm.
in my recent job search, I actually only applied for my one role, which I was my dream role, and I got it. So I'm very,
And we
very
spoke,
fortunate.
yeah, brilliant. I think we spoke when you were potentially,
Yes, months
exploring
ago. Yeah, I
just before
reached
maternity.
out.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, sorry. Yeah, I can, and that's amazing. I know many people um get that dream role and that, so I mean, this is great because it's a different market there for candidates. It's quite competitive. So what made you stand out? What did you do as a
Oh
candidate to
gosh,
stand out?
I have to say I'm actually going to be sharing some of my interview tips at
Go on. Yeah.
at a mentorship for junior through
Yes.
Launchpad in a few
Yeah.
weeks. But I can definitely chat through. I went above and beyond, I have to say. Like, when I set my
Brilliant.
sights on something, I really did go above and beyond. I had for example, I think I had 3 interviews, and my third was a presentation to all the senior leaders and the sales organization at HiBob. And it was a plan, it was very ambiguous. They left the task very open of what sales strategy would I do to build a successful team. I wrote up I think 30-page like dossier on my strategy, because I needed to formulate it. And then I shared that with them ahead of time. I put it together in slides. I wrote out what
Brilliant.
kind of Q&As I think for me, rather than go broad, I'm very much like, this is what I want, and I'm going to do everything to get it. And if I don't, that's fine. My ask to a business would be, look, I'm going to invest all this time and I'm really going to go for it. But my ask to you is then please give me the feedback, because it's a growth opportunity, if nothing else. But I would ask for that mutual respect of, I'm giving up a lot of my time, which I'm happy to do if I get the growth and feedback that I can learn and improve in future if I'm unsuccessful.
Awesome. Okay. Well, I think going above and beyond and really standing out is, and if you can do that, then you're probably doing your job right as a sales professional, right? You've got to make an impact.
Well, I think it's actually such an interesting point that you make there is I always say to salespeople, you should use your interview process to mimic a sales cycle, because it is, you're selling yourself.
Yeah.
So I would always go above and beyond, and I would ideally be showcasing, this is my best sales cycles. For example, I would do a touch point, hey, looking forward to our interview today, checking that it's happening. Post interview, I would write to each of my interviewers and thank them for the time and
Oh,
reiterate,
hallelujah.
hey, these were some questions that I had following off our interview. This is additionally why I want the role, why I think I'm the right fit. Throughout the process, I would ask objection questions. For example, do you have any hesitations based on what we've spoken today? And if they tell me, it's an opportunity for me to obviously have that discussion, but it also showcases my sales acumen. So I very much tell people, you should be doing everything you can to go above and beyond in that process to show your sales process and to showcase everything of why you're right for the role and why they should essentially like buy off you.
100%. 100%. I think going back, you referenced how excited you get when you see candidates that are female candidates that
Yes.
are account
Yes,
executives.
very.
I think you kind of were very vocal on LinkedIn quite recently, going, "Where are they?" Because I know
Yes.
you were recruiting at the time. Um, so what gets you to? I mean, as a hiring manager, right? What do you look for beyond that resume? So you go, okay, that's a, oh my God, I'm excited. This is a female account executive. So what stands out to you going, hey, that's a really good candidate?
Yeah, so I definitely get very excited when I see a female because of what we've spoken about, that almost disappearance at the senior level.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
they truly do get me very excited. But other than that, beyond obviously male, female, I'd look for similar things. And I do look for things like, for example, mums and parents do get me excited about someone's potential,
Can
because
relate
I
better.
because of exactly what we've spoken about as well, though. They have so many priorities in their life. If they're at work, they prioritize that. They're present. They're not going to stuff around with their time, because their time is their most valuable asset. So often
Mhm.
I celebrate all of the things that you learn of parenthood, and I see that as such a value asset. So that's something that I definitely
Wow.
personally think is a really valuable thing to be bringing to the workplace.
Well, they're going to be very organized sales professionals,
Yes,
which
exactly. Yeah, totally. And they're not gonna want to waste time, because their time is so precious to them.
precious. Yep.
Yeah. So that's something that personally for me, I do think that's such a valuable asset. Then
Awesome.
secondly, any like accomplishments or anything
Yep.
that shows who they are as a person, their drive, their discipline. So often anything that's, I was a competitive sports person is something I love to see in salespeople, because we're ultimately typically quite competitive people. Potentially someone who's been a pianist that has that discipline, that rigor to go and practice and learn. So that's something that definitely gets me really interested. Another is if they've learned something new. So that's actually, I'm cheating because that's actually an interview question I might ask,
Yeah.
is what have you learned new recently and how did you go about learning it? Because it just shows me how their brain works towards like goals, and setting a goal and achieving goals. All of those things are really important to me in terms of motivation and, yeah, how they pursue what they're interested in, they're passionate about.
No, that's spot on. I think that's brilliant. And what are the red flags that you go, oh my God? That what are the things that you think are the not so great things on a resume that puts them on the in the bottom pile?
Yeah, good question. I think for me, I'm a little
Just
allergic
one.
to very long resumes. Ultimately, like I
I'm
am. I am a working mum. So much like I think other people, our time is so precious. So I really want to be able to see like the cliff notes, if you will, or the highlights of your career, not a company summary. I don't care necessarily what the company you worked for did. I'm not looking for a summation
Mm.
of about them at all. I want to know your stats. I want to know how you stack ranked compared to other people in your team
Yeah.
because I fully accept that someone could hit 30%, but
Mm.
everyone else in their team might have been hitting zero. So I need that contextual layer of I
Yeah.
achieved this and I stack ranked this out of this many people, and I want stats, and then I want some key highlights of achievements. I worked on this project and I helped get it to XYZ spot. I'm not really uh, yeah, I'm a bit allergic to the long resumes. I want to scan and be yes, no very quickly. So that's for me a bit of a red flag. And also attention to detail.
Mm.
So I actually anecdotally was recently sent a resume and they had used a template. That's fine. Work smarter, not harder. Fully accept that. We all use, our little shortcuts in life. But they'd left on fill in here, and for me, that was just a small red flag. I still actually gave the person a go because I liked other things in their resume. But in the back of my mind, I was like, okay, red flag, attention to detail. So just having attention to detail on your resume and being mindful to double check it before you're sending it out.
No, that's perfect. And I think we see a lot of that in sales resumes. Like that's a big thing when it comes to attention to detail, but it really depends on the level of role it is. Because if you're
Yeah,
hiring,
that's true.
in SDR, I see a lot of lack of attention to detail. And then you've got your enterprise sales professionals that, you've got a really polished resume. So it really,
Yeah, it's
well,
definitely like contextual. And
yeah,
I think obviously different hiring managers approach things differently, but I always want to approach things with a level of empathy and understanding, and we're all human. But I'm probably on the nicer scale of that. So I think something to be mindful of is just double checking always.
100%. And there's so many apps and tools out there that do it for you, right? So why not make use of technology? So
Yeah,
yeah,
definitely. Work smarter, not harder. We've got to
exactly.
prioritize our
Chat.
time.
It's quite funny because I spoke to a candidate quite recently and he's like, I had my entire resume written up by ChatGPT. I was
That's
like,
fine.
well, why not? Why not?
Yeah.
Saves you time. And I think that's, yeah, brilliant. But I know that you're really pressed for time. I know you've got a lot on, and I know you've taken this time out for us. But just before we let you go, lovely Lucinda, if you could share three pieces of advice for women in sales, what would they be?
I think for anyone in sales, it's and women as well, it's that you need to be, goal orientated always, and it's not going to be up to someone else to manage you to those goals. It's very much in sales, I see it as you're the CEO of your own business, your own territory. Your number is your number to own and
Yeah,
drive. As a manager, I see myself facilitating when there's blockers in my team's way that I need to go and remove red tape or get them access to something they need access to, but very
yeah,
much that they're empowered to own their number, own their book of business. So that intrinsic motivation and drive is something I would look for over other things because I always prescribe that you can coach other skills, but I can't coach someone to have that motivation and drive. So for me, that's huge. The other thing is being curious always. So curious about your prospects, being curious to learn. And I personally believe you can learn from any single person, the most junior person in an organization. You can learn from them if you have an open mind to learning. Every single person has different attributes and values that make them someone that you should be curious to understand. How do you do that? How could I learn from them? And so for me, that's something I always look for is that curiosity. And that's kind of the two main things. I know you're asking
amazing.
me for three, but those are the two
That's
ones
fine.
for
No,
me.
no, that they're probably very important pieces of advice. So thank you for sharing them. Is there anything else that you'd like to kind of share with our audience? I mean, I think we've got around 15,000 people that potentially we send this to. So,
Oh,
you know,
wow.
yeah, so we just want to make sure that, we give as much value as we can. We're quite niche as sales recruiters, so it's important that we get industry professionals like yourself sharing some really valuable insight, but not just our clients, but our candidates out there.
Just for me, I personally think sales can be such an amazing profession
Mm-hmm.
for females. And if you find the right company that aligns with your values and aligns, managers and they have that same values that you do, then it can be such an amazing career opportunity for women or for families and parents because it does have flexibility. Like traditionally, a lot of the companies I've worked for will say we're not really fussed about desk sitting and we don't really necessarily care as long as you're hitting your number, as long as you're doing everything right and you're creating that work
Mm,
and output. There's not necessarily like micromanagement.
mm,
In my experience, that only happens if there's something to be micromanaged or a reason for it. I'll always say to people, it's my least favorite part of my job. Please don't make me do it.
yeah.
I'm only doing it if there's a reason. But
Mm,
because there are KPIs and there is kind of usually a methodology and a formula of,
yeah.
back even when I started at IQPC, 100 cold calls a day, I think 10 proposals a day
Mm,
equals X amount of sales. And I just always prescribed to the formula and the work. And the better you get at your skills, then that formula might reduce, it might change. But knowing that formula and being able to have goals and perform to them then gives you flexibility. So to me, I've always believed sales is such a great career opportunity, especially for the pay component. A lot of my
oh,
friends
totally.
who are very successful females have said to me, from the finance industry and things like that, that they're not necessarily paid compared to their counterparts. I've never once had that feeling in sales. I've always believed that I'm paid fairly, if not more, than a lot of my male counterparts because I negotiate. So for me, I've never once had to have that concern, which I think is a really special thing when I hear from my friends that they've had, different experience to that.
Yeah. I also think not everyone's got that intrinsic motivation from within to just pick up the phone and have a cold call. Like it
Yeah.
has to be, I think that's something that came really naturally to you, Lucinda, just going back.
I used to say I made cold calling warm. I think I did.
Oh, you were amazing at that. So I think, I mean, they say sales is an out of body perspective, right? Like you can, you need to love it. You either love it or hate it. So
Yeah.
it's just, yeah. So yeah, it's a challenge. I think, and females are a little bit more subservient, I feel, to kind of make that. Every female I talk to wants to be in an account manager role, right?
Yeah, yeah, because
Everyone.
maybe because they're traditionally better at relationship building, which personally I'm too impatient, I think, to be an account manager. I think I very much appreciate
Customer
account
success.
managers. Yes,
Yeah, yeah.
I'm too impatient. There's too many problems coming at you that you have to solve. I like the thrill of the win. I'm new business all
100%.
the way.
It's either hunter or farmer. And
Yes,
I mean, I'm like you, I'm a hunter. I used to think I stepped into an internal recruitment role where I had to manage multiple stakeholders, but I'd much rather be a recruiter. And I realized that's where I stood out and that's where my strengths lie. So I'm definitely a hunter. So I get you when I don't really have the patience for oh, I don't know.
I'm just not that good of a person. I really applaud all of the CSMs and the AMs. I just could never.
Oh, bless, bless. Well, look, I think we've covered so much ground.
So much.
It was so lovely to see you again. And when I'm in Sydney again, I'd love to catch up.
Definitely. Anytime.
Okay?
I'd love to catch up. It'd be so
And
nice to see you after all these years. You're
and just
almost
have
like, my first ever placement into a professional role. So you'll always have
yeah.
a special spot in my heart.
And you know what? I'll tell you what I looked for. I didn't really look for any experience. I just looked for someone that, really I think you need that really um, high energy vocal when you're talking to someone as a candidate who's just really excited and curious, and you've covered all of that. So that's what we looked for back in the day. And I mean, I think a lot of those the people that you worked with have gone off and had some really successful careers. So
Definitely. I
yeah,
genuinely do really think, when I walked into IQPC for my interview, you all offered me the role that day. So I think
Yeah.
I interviewed with you and then the other hiring managers, and I had no experience or background in sales, and I gave it a go. I was very fortunate to be very successful very quickly due to being curious and open and
Oh
hungry for
yeah.
development. But ultimately, the training and development that we got at that company was the best I've ever had in my career.
Oh
And
yeah.
I'm still
100%.
so grateful for that foundational knowledge and being in the trenches, because it did create so much resilience and
Oh,
learning and accelerated the journey. So it was a really formative time.
and your expectations aren't very high when you move to the next role with broken chairs, but with all of that, I think it was it was loads of fun. I think it was the
It was
culture,
so
just
much fun. Yeah, it was.
culture and just the constant training, just
Yeah.
everyone having that same level of energy, just the social element, just such a big thing, especially when you're starting off in sales. It's what
Yeah.
really drives you to turn up every day. So no, I agree.
Yeah.
Lucinda, thank you so much for taking the time
No, no
with me.
problems.
I'll let you get back to finishing off what you need to do from a work perspective so you can then go back to your babies and your husband and your life.
I've been looking up every now and then with a few slacks coming my way.
I know. I'll let you go, but thank you so much. Oh,
Bye.
bye.
Bye.